in 2018 in England. I was writing it really from 2016 to 2018. I did not think we would be where we are now. You had the recent AI report, AI...
of technological change you're talking about?
100%. I didn't think that now. And that's with regards to things like machine learning, the stuff you're seeing with generative AI. It's also the case with the human-like robots you're now seeing, particularly in places like China. I also didn't think that China's electric vehicle industry would be anything like as powerful as it is. Obviously, the book isn't just about AI and robotics. It's about renewable energy. It's about, off-world asteroid mining, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty much on every count, I didn't expect us to be this far advanced. And so those questions that I raise in the book are actually far more salient in 2025 than I thought they would be. Finally, and it's again something I overlooked, I kind of regret overlooking it, is the role played, Crystal, of geopolitics and great power politics. This rivalry between the US and China is clearly what is going to drive forward AI, technological change. And it's one of the reasons now being given by people as to why we shouldn't have guardrails. If the US has guardrails, well, then China's going to develop something really powerful and leave us behind, and the exact same conversations are happening in China. So lots of big questions. And I thought we would have maybe 20, 25 years before they were relevant. But I think before the end of this decade, Crystal, there's stuff that the left, progressives, basically anybody who cares about the future of society needs to get on top of, not just intellectually, but actually with a policy response.
So let's take a look at some of the indications of that rapid development, focusing in sort of on AI. There have been a bunch of these. There's a new product out. I don't remember what it's called. That would have been helpful. But it allows you to create these video clips with simple prompts that are indistinguishable from reality. And people have been sharing these around, these like fake newscaster clips. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of those.
In shocking news, J.K. Rowling's yacht sank with her on board after being attacked by orcas off the coast of Turkey.
Breaking news. A Scottish fold cat named Big White has led an army of felines to seize Buckingham Palace, declaring itself the new King of Britain.
Those are shockingly realistic, even if the content is a little preposterous. You also have a couple of troubling indications. And there's been research to this effect already, that some of these chatbots already engage in scheming to try to avoid having their priorities changed or avoid shutting down. There was this bizarre situation I'm sure you followed with Grok deciding to talk all about South Africa and white, quote unquote, white genocide and kill the Boer, which was in some ways, different from what its humans, in some ways it was consistent with what the humans wanted it to do, but it was in some ways different as well. We can put though E3 up on the screen. ChatGPT ignored an explicit instruction to switch off in some tests that were being run. We can put the next one up on the screen, which is really wild. There was a test that was done with the Amazon-backed AI model where it, in order to, again, avoid being shut down, it tried to blackmail an engineer about not a real affair, but they'd given it access to these emails that indicated that an engineer was having an affair, and tried to blackmail this person with the affair to try to keep from getting shut down. I mean, it's funny, but it's also terrifying because we're only at this level of development. It makes you wonder. It seems like already humans don't have total control over these things. It makes you wonder when we get to that next stage of development, how sort of autonomous and out of the hands of the human developers these technologies are going to be.
That's entirely right. The report I referred to a few moments ago, AI 2027, speculates that Q3 2027, so a little bit over 2 years from now, you'll start to see the full automation of research units within big artificial intelligence companies, which is to say AI will be building the AI, at which point we may see, this is pure speculation, we may see a J-curve with regards to the computational power, the problem-solving ability of artificial intelligence. Now, what I've seen in terms of people criticizing that, pushing it back, is, that's far too soon. That won't happen in 2 years' time. Well, even if you think it's going to happen in 10 years' time, that's not a particularly good rebuttal. Even if you think it's 20 years' time, I don't think that's a particularly good response. But it could happen within 2 years' time. And I think we should politically respond in such a manner as to presume that it's very soon. It's very imminent. And there's a few ways to look at this. So on the one hand, you might get an AGI, of course, right? You might get something which sounds like The Matrix or Skynet. Park that for a moment, because I think almost the conversation about an existential threat masks the far more likely and far more pernicious impacts of this stuff. park that for a moment. If you do get a business, a private corporate entity with AI that can, augment its own intelligence to such an extent that all of a sudden you have just overwhelming superiority in pretty much every field of affairs, every industry. Imagine the value capture that's available to that company. It would be like a business discovering, the steam engine and having patent rights and nobody else can get it. Of course, that happened in the 18th century rather, with Watt and Bolton. But it was a very different. There wasn't a global market. There wasn't patent law like there is now necessarily. You would see something like the steam engine competing against the horse and cart in every major global industry really quickly. You would not want a single firm to have that kind of monopoly. You wouldn't want that kind of oligopoly either. And I think the far more pernicious threat rather than an AGI is basically what we've seen with big tech over the last 20, 25 years. Look what Amazon's done to your high street, okay? Look what Meta and Alphabet have done to kids' attention spans. Look what it's done to reported self-harm with regards to teenagers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these social harms from big tech, negative externalities. High streets in this country, Crystal, they're destroyed because all that value has been captured by these really powerful global corporations in the United States. I would say 5x that. Right?
Yeah.
And that's the best case scenario. That's not the AGI scenario. That's the better case scenario. And I almost feel that people like Sam Altman, Elon Musk want to talk about AGI, so we don't talk about the wealth inequality, the regional inequality, the global inequality, because the only two countries in this race are China and the US. The only two countries. The European Union's not at the races. None of the global south is at the races. And so that, to me, is the big conversation. Even if you think AGI is not plausible, this is still a massive political challenge.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. And to your point, some of the consequences may already be here. We can put E5 up on the screen. There was an article in the New York Times. I'm a LinkedIn executive. I see the bottom rung of the career ladder breaking. And, it makes sense that the type of work that new college grads tend to do, sort of like entry-level office, white-collar jobs, that would be the first place that you really spot an impact. So in particular, college grad unemployment is at 30% here in the US, which is quite high. We also see a huge spike in applications to law school, which is also, it tends to be a recession indicator because people feel like, I don't want to go out in the job market now, so let me just continue my schooling. But it also could be an indicator here of, people realizing those entry-level desk jobs where you're doing spreadsheet analysis, or you're, when you're coming out of law school, the first year out, and you're doing all of this kind of grunt, relatively routine work for the more senior level partners. Those will be the first things to go, where maybe instead of hiring 20 new fresh out of law school students, maybe you hire 5 and give them ChatGPT to do your first write of, whatever you're drafting. So in some ways, it seems that the pernicious effects are already starting to show up. Aaron, what are some of the areas where you think we should be sort of most, if we're thinking about triaging this situation, what are some of the areas that you think we should focus on most immediately?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. So with the emergence of general purpose robotics in manufacturing, we saw white collar communities be destroyed basically over the last 35, 40 years, particularly in the UK, also the US, much of Western Europe. Many of those jobs went abroad, as people like Donald Trump like to talk about, but many, many, many more were automated. I think we're going to see something similar with regards to machine learning and white collar jobs, like you say. They won't be replaced, just like, we still manufacture cars here in the UK with a far higher productivity per person per hour worked. There's far fewer people doing the work. I think something similar is going to happen to these kinds of jobs. And I think that the first implication that you should draw out of that is a political one. Peter Turchin did a great book a few years ago, and he talked about this idea of elite overproduction. And I do think that when automation deprives lots of ambitious, often moderate to highly intelligent young people of a career that they expected, they've put themselves in a ton of debt. They feel that they've played by the rules. They've done everything that was asked of them. And then they're still back at square one. And you have that elite overproduction. And they think, well, I should be a part of the body politic. I should be playing a role. I should have an impact on on public life like anybody else. These are people who believe in the idea of citizenship and shaping politics and having agency. That's generally how the middle class conceive of themselves. If you see those people all of a sudden being annihilated by the jobs market,